So occasionally we have technical difficulties. Right as the intro was supposed to be starting up there, um, PowerPoint decided to crash. So sorry about that. Imagine that you had that nice elaborate little pocket-sized apologetics intro that just started with that. I'm going to try to get it back up again because we do have a couple slides I wanted to show folks today, and hopefully that will work this time around and it won't crash on us. But anyway, so hey, welcome to episode, what are we up to now? 79 of Pocket Size Apologetics. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ken Coughlin. For those of you that have watched this program in the past, hold on, it's saying funky things to me over here. You might know that remember that normally the way this show works is we have it's usually been about a 4 to 5 minute program where it's me in front of a green screen with all sorts of neat little graphics, and we cover basically one apologetic thought, one topic, very brief, per week. Now, unfortunately, with the COVID-19 closures and everything, the timing was such that I had run out of pre-filmed episodes right as everything was coming down as far as all the closures were concerned. And so I am also, for those that don't know me, I am also the video guy here at Trinity. And so it was my job to make sure that we were able to continue to reach out to our congregation members with live streaming, things like that. And so during last week, I was busy, trying to set up all the live streaming technology there in the sanctuary. And so even though the congregation couldn't come in, we were still putting on worship services there from the sanctuary that we were live streaming out to everyone. And then the order, we're here in Maryland, and our Governor Hogan, gave the order on Monday about closing all what they call non-essential businesses. And so I had to, once I got everything working there from the sanctuary, had to pack everything up and bring it all home. And so now my home office is kind of a command center, so to speak, where we are running worship services and other live streams from here with people, whether it be, I get the video feeds, we set up video conferences and things like that into here, and I kind of combine it all together along with my wife, and we put it out onto a live stream. So as a result of all that, I had no time to film additional episodes of pocket-sized apologetics. So the question was, well, what's the solution going to be? And we decided, hey, let's go ahead and I'll just do it live and talk to people live. And so that's that's kind of what we come up with. It's kind of changed the format a little bit. It's got a different feel to it. But hopefully, whether you're able to watch us live on Fridays at noon or you're watching this replay sometime later, hopefully it will you'll still get some benefit from it. I would like to encourage as many people as possible to try to watch it live at noon on Fridays. And the reason I say that is because with everything else that I've got going on, I know if you see the post on Facebook or you may comment on the video in the comment section, please do that. I got to be honest with you. If you're looking for a response from me as opposed to other viewers, I don't have a lot of time to be looking at the comments section, right now while I'm trying to get everything else sorted and doing all our other live streams for Trinity. And so your best opportunity to actually interact with me, ask me a question, challenge me on something, whatever it is you may want to do, is if you can watch the live stream and you can comment in the live chat, then I will be able to respond to you right here on the show. So if you do, as we go through things today, if you do have any questions about anything, any comments about anything, just go ahead and put them in the live chat, and I will be able to answer you right here on the air. So what we've been doing, in case if you haven't been following along with this show over past almost 2 years now, a year and a half, 2 years we've been doing this, is we've been working our way through various different arguments for the existence of God. And we've talked about different forms of what's called the cosmological argument. We talked about the argument from reason, the evolutionary argument against naturalism. Last week, I actually did talk a little bit about Pascal's wager. So if you didn't get a chance to watch that episode, go ahead and go back and watch that episode. And this week, what I want to do is I want to talk about an argument that a lot of people aren't as familiar with, maybe haven't heard before, and that's called the argument from desire. And I know in some of the Facebook posts I put out there, I asked the question, how is it that our desires actually provide evidence for God? And that's kind of what this argument gets at. Now, I do want to kind of give a little caveat before we get launching into the specifics of what this argument is. And like I said, if you have any questions along the way, put them in the live chat. Be happy to answer them for you. This argument it relies entirely on what's called inductive reasoning. There's deductive reasoning and there's inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is, the best way to put it in kind of layman's terms, is if we see something is true in example after example after example, maybe even every relevant example we can come up with, we reasonably assume that that thing is universally true. That is a universal rule. Now, these inductive arguments are not definitive 100% certainty proof. All right, they're not. Because it's always possible, even if something has been true in every single prior instance to today, that in the next instance it won't be. All right? But that doesn't mean that in everyday life we're not justified in being reasonable. We're not reasonable in making inductive conclusions. And I'll give you a very simple one. The sun has risen every single day in the past that we've witnessed, and so we assume that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. Now, do we know, does that fact alone, the fact that it's always risen in the past, give us 100% definitive certainty that it's going to rise again tomorrow? No, it doesn't. But is it still reasonable to assume the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Anybody who has plans on your calendar after today is assuming the sun is going to rise tomorrow. There's going to be another day tomorrow. All right? And so it's not an unreasonable inductive conclusion to make that there's going to be another day tomorrow. And we all live our lives that way. We make plans for what we're going to be doing in the future. So that's what an inductive argument is. And you need to understand that the argument from desire is an inductive argument. Now, I'm going to, towards the end of my little spiel here, I will give a deductive form of just looking at it, but understand that each element of it still relies upon this kind of inductive thought process. It's always been true in the past, or it's true in every other instance, so we assume it's going to be true universally. Now, the argument from desire, it does hinge on the fact that we desire things. We want things. There's things that we wish for. However, there's two different types of desires. Peter Kreeft breaks these down into natural desires and artificial desires. And understanding the difference between the two is absolutely critical. As a matter of fact, almost every single objection I've seen raised against the argument for desire misses this distinction. And this is why the objections go off track, because they fail to comprehend or acknowledge the difference between natural desires and artificial desires. Natural desires are those things that stem from within ourselves. All right. For example, these are the types, for example, things like we desire food, we desire drink, we desire sleep, we desire friendship. These types of things are innate needs within humanity. They're part of what it means to be human. All right. Now, that's not to say there aren't individual exceptions to that. There's always anomalies. But speaking generally of the human race as a whole, these types of desires are innate in humanity. All right. They're common to humanity. Artificial desires, on the other hand, are things that stem from outside of ourselves. Artificial desires are the types of things that our culture or our upbringing instills in us. We want things like maybe we want a better paying job, or we want to have lots of money, or we want to wear the latest fashions, or we want to fly like Superman, because I just saw, Christopher Reeve in Superman. I thought it was really cool to be able to fly without anything holding me up. All right. Those are artificial desires. Those types of desires aren't innate in what it means to be human. They're things we want because something outside of ourselves convinces us that we want them. Okay? That's a very, very important distinction to understand. Now, if you look at these two types of desires, natural desires and artificial desires, everything in the first category, natural desires, all right, has some possibility of fulfillment on this earth, in this world. There's something on earth that can fulfill that desire. For example, if you're hungry, food exists. If you're thirsty, beverages exist. If you long for companionship, other people exist. All right. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we all have equal access to those things. That's not the point of the argument. All right. Sure, there are certain parts of this world that are, much more suffering with starvation and hunger than other parts are. But the point is that these things, these objects, do exist in the world. They are there. There's something we can point to that can fulfill those natural desires. All right. This is not necessarily the case for artificial desires. With artificial desires, sometimes there might be something out there that exists to fulfill them. Other times there's not. For example, if you're longing for more money, all right, well, yes, money does exist, although, in limited quantities. But if your artificial desires, you want to fly like Superman without anything holding you up, there's nothing that exists in this physical world that's going to enable you to do that. All right. So natural desires, there is always something we can point to that can fulfill them. Artificial desires, sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. All right. C.S. Lewis, in his book, Mere Christianity, he explains it like this, all right? And now we'll see, there we go, the PowerPoint's working now. He says, creatures are not born with desires, and here we're speaking of natural desires, unless satisfaction for these desires exists. A baby feels hunger. Well, there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim. Well, there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire. Well, there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. So that begs the question, is there a desire, a natural desire, which we see in this world, in which nothing in this world can satisfy? C.S. Lewis says yes. And so does Peter Kreeft, who we talked about earlier. We all seem to have a natural desire for ultimate fulfillment or ultimate joy. The key word here being ultimate, that nothing in this world can satisfy. Have you ever, for example, heard the expression that if you find a job you love, then you'll never work another day in your life? All right. What's behind that expression? What's behind that expression is the idea that we want to be doing something that we find personally fulfilling, right? We also want to be happy. That's another example that C.S. Lewis gives. We want to be happy. Well, there are certainly things in this life that can make us happy, but all of those things are limited in some way, shape, or form. The old expression is, all good things must come to an end. So when we reach that end, when we reach the end of something that's making us happy, it's not like we're like, oh, okay, I'm good now. We still have that desire where we still want to be happy. We still want to be fulfilled. And so we have this desire for ultimate happiness, ultimate fulfillment. And yet there's nothing in this world that we can point to that can satisfy those desires ultimately. All right. So that would be an example of what C.S. Lewis is talking about when he says that if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is I was made for another world. We could put this all together into an argument. Peter Kreeft has a scholar who has put this all together into an argument, the same gentleman who made those distinctions between natural and artificial desires. And he boils it down like this. He says, premise 1, every natural innate desire in us corresponds to some real object that can satisfy that desire. And that's what we were talking about before. If for every natural desire, there's something we can point to that can satisfy it. For food, or if we're hungry, there's food. If we're thirsty, there's drink, things like that. Premise 2, but there exists in us a desire which nothing in time, nothing on earth, no creature can satisfy. All right, and this is getting to what we were just talking about. We have these ultimate desires, these desires for ultimate fulfillment, for ultimate joy. And yet, while we see things here on earth that might be able to give us some kind of partial satisfaction, there's nothing here we can point to on earth that can give us ultimate satisfaction in those areas. Conclusion, therefore, there must exist something more than time, earth, and creatures which can satisfy this desire. And this is that inductive conclusion we were talking about, that if in every other example, every other natural desire we see, there is something that exists that is capable of fulfilling it, then in this natural desire that we see, there must be something that exists that is capable of fulfilling it. And then he wraps it up by saying this something is what people call God and life with God forever. All right? So, that's the basic framework of the argument from desire, and how the fact that we have these natural desires in every other instance, we can observe that there's something that exists that is capable of satisfying those natural desires. So what about these ultimate desires that we feel? Is there something that exists that is capable of satisfying those? Well, if not, then they're going to be the lone exception to this general rule we see, and that seems kind of odd. All right. What seems more likely is that if in every other instance we can come up with, there is something that is capable of satisfying these natural desires, then for this natural desire, there is likely something that is capable of satisfying them as well. And the only candidate for that, if it's an ultimate desire, the only thing that can give you ultimate satisfaction is God. All right. Now, again, notice that all of these premises, every step in this is an inductive step. All right. Does this give you 100% certainty that all these premises are true? No, of course it doesn't. All right, any more than you can have 100% certainty that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. But that doesn't mean it's not reasonable. These aren't reasonable conclusions to make. And I like the argument from desire. I like to kind of use it as part of a cumulative case. All right. In and of itself, I don't know if the argument from desire is going to convince anybody by itself. But it is one more piece of the puzzle, along with all those other arguments we were talking about, whether it be the cosmological argument, the evolutionary argument against naturalism, the argument from reason, Pascal's wager, all these things we put together, and they provide a pretty darn powerful cumulative case. Because understand that for God not to exist, all these arguments need to be wrong. Every single one of them. And there's more we're going to go into in the future as well. And so it gets harder and harder to make that case the more arguments that you build up, the more things we can point to that seem to point to God. Now, I do want to give one example. I talked about at the beginning that, and forgive me, again, I get laryngitis a lot. I've been talking a lot lately. I talked about at the beginning that most of the objections I see raised against the argument from desire miss the point. They miss the distinction that we talked about at the beginning between natural desires and artificial desires. And they'll say something like this: just because I want something doesn't mean it exists. All right. And they'll kind of summarize the argument from desire as if that's what it is. That's what we call a straw man. All right. That's not what the argument from desire says. A straw man argument is where you build up a false version of some argument that you want to tear down, and then you tear down that false version. Why? Because it's a lot easier to tear down the false version than it is to tear down the real thing, right? Hence the straw man nature of it. The argument for desire doesn't say just because I want something to be true, then therefore it must exist. As a matter of fact, it openly acknowledges that there are many desires that we have that do not have the possibility of fulfillment, but they all fall under the category of artificial desires. And so when someone raises this type of objection, they'll say, I may want $1 million doesn't mean that, $1 million exists. I may want to fly like Superman. Doesn't mean that there's the capability or the possibility of flying like Superman. All right. And they're right. It doesn't mean that. But those are artificial desires. And what we pointed out is the argument from desire says that it openly acknowledges there are artificial desires that can't be fulfilled. But for every natural desire we have, there is a possibility of fulfillment. There's something in the real world that can fulfill it. And so the only way really that you can defeat the argument from reason would be to do one of two things. One, to try to claim that this desire for ultimate joy, this desire for ultimate fulfillment, isn't a natural desire. It's an artificial desire. That's going to be a pretty hard argument to make, again, because there's not Our desire to be happy is, cross-cultural. Our desire to be fulfilled is cross-cultural. It transcends culture, transcends time. And so that's not something that seems to be instilled in us solely by cultural input, or by our upbringing, for example. And the other way that you could try to defeat the argument from desire is to try to say that, to point out a whole bunch of natural desires that don't have the possibility of fulfillment, other natural desires. But again, that's a pretty high hurdle to jump, because that doesn't seem to be the case. We have this natural desire for food, for hunger. We do desire food, and food exists. We do desire drink, and drink exists. We do desire companionship, and other people exist. So those are really the only two ways that you can actually attack this argument, and neither one of them seems to really be fulfilling, to really satisfy, to be possible to refute it on those terms. All right. So again, I apologize for my voice going out. Like I said, I've been talking a lot. I just preached on Wednesday night. But that's the argument from desire. If you do have any questions, again, you can put them in the comments section. I'll try to take a look at it here over the course of the next week. I'm really busy. But otherwise, make sure that you make plans to join us next Friday at 12 noon. I got to look at my schedule again. I think that next Friday, first I'm going to take a drink of water here. I think that next Friday we're launching into the moral argument, which is a more popular one that generates a little bit more dispute. But basically what it says is that because objective morality exists, that means that God exists. And we'll go into more specifics about that, and I'm betting we might even carry that over a few weeks. That won't just be a one-week episode. All right? So thank you very much for watching. Like this video, please share it with other people, especially this argument. I think a lot of people probably haven't heard about it. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got some other great things on here. My voice is really going. I got to stop talking. In addition to this weekly program, we got a lot of live streams going on. As a matter of fact, if you do watch this here on Friday, tune in again at 7 o'clock tonight on the Trinity Joppa channel. We've got a great live worship concert from Ryan and Jessica McAllister that's going to be broadcast here on the channel. Tuesday nights at 7, Pastor Jay Jackson has a interactive Bible study that he's doing here on the channel. And every morning, Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock, our head of school, Randy Gass, has a morning devotion that he's doing. And we got some really cool, exciting things coming for the kids as well. So tune in, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Thank you very much for tuning in. God bless.